Thank you for joining us, everyone, today. My name is Erin Grebe. My background is in pediatrics, and then I did a pediatric sports medicine fellowship. And most recently, I've become very interested in sports psychology and the mental well-being of our athletes. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and we'll get started. Okay. So here we are, sports psychology for all. I have no conflict of interest or financial disclosures to report. Now, the objectives for this talk describe sports psychology and mental strength or performance training, discuss techniques used in mental strength or performance training, discuss special considerations for the injured athlete, and then review indications for specialized care. Now, back in 22 in JAMA Pediatrics, there was the National Survey of Children's Health from 2020 that was reported. This survey looked at 73 million youth from ages 0 to 17 living, there's 73 million youth living in the US, ages 0 to 17, and this is 22% of the population. If we're focused on improving the country's overall health, we need to focus on the well-being of our children and their families. So the survey showed that between 2016 and 2020, there was a significant increase in children diagnosed with anxiety and depression. And you can see here, from ages 3 to 17, those diagnosed with anxiety grew by 29%. And those diagnosed with depression grew by 27%. The study also showed that there was a decrease in physical activity in youth at this time. Now, youth connect physical health to mental health. Active youth report more excitement, happiness, motivation, whereas inactive youth, they're more worried, depressed, nervous, and anxious. So there's clearly a role for positive sports experiences on the mental health of our athletes, and that's why it's so important that we really focus on this. When youth enjoy sports, they're more likely to stick with it. We'll have decreased numbers of youth leaving organized sports as they're entering adolescence, and so that will really increase the overall health of our youth and our population in general. Oops. Okay. So when we think about sports participation, there are 45 to 60 million youth who participate in sports annually. Approximately 60 to 70% of school-age children are involved in at least one organized sport. And so we can see that active youth equal healthier youth. Now, sports psychology, what is it? It's a specific area of psychology that looks at the mental factors that influence performance as well as the well-being of athletes. There are mental performance coaches in applied sports psychology, and what their goal is to really teach the skills and provide the mental training for athletes. So these are some of the skills that are worked on with sports psychology or mental performance training. So mental preparation for competition, focus, creating an optimal training environment, excelling under pressure, self-talk, resilience, concentration, quality practice, visualization, confidence, mental recovery, dealing with general life stress and well-being, coach-athlete relationships, communication, mental training when athletes are going through injuries, dealing with critical transitions in a sport career, and then also dealing with the mental side of the business aspects of being in a pro sport. So sports psychology is really a vehicle for life lessons. And for some, this may be the only opportunity for them to learn these skills. And not only does mental performance training make an impact on the field, but it also impacts all areas of life. And these are skills that individuals can use off the field also. Mental training can be applied at all levels of sport: recreational, competitive, elite. And this is really a key concept here. When people think about sports psychology, they often think about pro athletes, Olympic athletes who have their sports psychologist there with them, their mental performance coach there on the sideline, helping them in this high stress situation. But the reality is, if we need to make this more accessible and make it a natural part of sports training, athletic training for all individuals. Now, mental training is a set of learned skills. They can be taught, practiced, and mastered, just like the physical skills that athletes are learning. So, sports psychology, not just for athletes. It's actually sought out by professionals in high stress jobs, surgeons, firefighters, those in the performing arts. It's also used by those in tactical positions, so military personnel, paramedics, police officers. And the US Army is actually the largest employer of sports psychologists. They use mental skills training to improve cognitive and physical abilities. So you can see here, this was an article in Forbes, How to Use Sports Psychology to Perform Better in Business. This is from the US Army, really focusing on that mental skills training for their soldiers. All right, so historically, there has really been this fix-it idea, this fix-it model for sports psychology. Um, the idea being that an athlete has an issue, team has an issue, you call in the sports psychologist and they come in, they meet with everyone, and they try to fix the problem. You can see here, this is one of the first sports psychology textbooks, Problem Athletes and How to Handle Them. And unfortunately, this is a view that still persists today. And what I propose is that we move past this. So this is, we're thinking about a build it versus a fix it model. And this graphic is courtesy of Dr. Zuliger at Adams State University. And so what we're doing is we're really giving individuals the skills and teaching them the right skills to handle the mental side of sport, so that then we don't have to come in and fix things later. And if we do, they have a lot of the skills that we want them to have, and it becomes easier to fix things if an issue arises. So with the Build It model, the focus is on that everyone can benefit from mental performance training or mental strength training, regardless of their level of competition. We're teaching these fundamental skills to everyone. And then, as I said, if a problem arises, it's easier to address this down the road. All right, this is the mental strength model, again, courtesy of Dr. Zuliger. So what we're looking at here is we're looking at these different areas that it's really important to address and focus on. And these are really the training blocks for mental performance training. And we're going to go through each of these and talk about them a little bit and go through some techniques and training skills and exercises that can be used. All right, so the first one is motivation, and this is really the foundation of mental performance training. Motivation is the drive and the will to pursue and persist in an activity. Each individual has their own motivation, and it's important to really analyze and figure out what the motivation is and address it. There's certainly different types of motivation that last longer, are psychologically better for individuals. And so it's important to figure out what the motivation really is. There are different areas that we look at for motivation. So the first one is reward. Are we looking at an intrinsic reward for motivation or extrinsic? So with intrinsic, the reward comes from within. An individual has pride, satisfaction, they're fulfilled, they're having fun. So that would be intrinsic motivation. Extrinsic is where the reward comes from the outside. Trophies, championships, scholarships, money, these would all be extrinsic motivation. And as I mentioned, the intrinsic motivation is better psychologically, and it actually lasts longer than an extrinsic motivation. These are some other areas to consider for sources of motivation. So the source of the driver, who's really pushing this athletic endeavor? Is it internal or external? So that means, is it the athlete? Is it the parents who are really pushing things? Is it the coach who's really pushing things? The source of direction. Are we approaching things, or are we avoiding things? Are we so scared about making a mistake and we're fearful of the punishment that comes in practice? Or are we embracing it and really going forward with courage and not scared about things? And then there's also the ethical reference. Is it positive or negative? Are we following the rules of the sport? Are we doing what's right? Or are we not following the rules and doing what's wrong? And so it's important to consider all of these. And what we want to develop in our athletes or other individuals who are looking at mental performance training, we want to help them develop intrinsic motivation, internal motivation, approach motivation, and positive motivation. All right, another area to consider when you're thinking about motivation is meaning and purpose. And so it's important to think about for an athlete or an individual, why do I play this sport? What is the purpose of playing this sport? If sport is the only thing in my life, what would that look like? And what happens if the sport doesn't go well? Another area to consider is commitment and mastery. So commitment is really being dedicated to a cause or activity. Mastery is when you have comprehensive knowledge or skill in a subject. And in order to achieve mastery, consistency is really key. Now, these are some quotes from Des Linden, who won the Boston Marathon in 2018. And if anyone saw that, if you saw, she kind of held back and waited for Shalane Flanagan while Flanagan stopped at a porta potty. And Des's goal was to actually help Shalane Flanagan win. If she couldn't win herself, she wanted to help someone else. But in the end, she ended up winning. And so these are some quotes from her. So you can see, people don't look at me and say super talented. They look at me and say hard worker. And so for her, consistency is really key. The second post she made on Twitter is, some days it just flows and I feel like I'm born to do this. Other days it feels like I'm trudging through hell. Every day I make a choice to show up and see what I've got and to try and be better. My advice, keep showing up. And so she's speaking to the importance of consistency and commitment. And so it's important to consider these and to really help athletes recognize the importance of this and to develop these skills. Okay, so next in the mental strength model is well-being. So when we think about well-being, we can think about the well-being theory with the acronym PERMA by Seligman. And so this is positive emotions, engagement, relationships, and these should be positive relationships, meaning and purpose, and then accomplishment. And so what we find is that really a lack of focus is often rooted in poor well-being. And so this is an area that we will really want to address with our athletes so that they can achieve focus. And identity and self-esteem are really part of well-being. And so we want to incorporate as many of these as possible into our life to increase general well-being, because we recognize that athletes who are flourishing in their lives actually perform better. So it's important to consider confidence as part of well-being. So this is the inside-out approach to confidence building. And what this is that we're really focused on self-esteem and self-identity where someone feels good about themselves. And they feel good about themselves regardless of outcome of athletic performance. And this is really key here. Mistakes are seen as feedback, not as this really negative event that has detrimental effects to the self-esteem of an individual. In contrast, which is how a lot of individuals often see things, how maybe coaches see things, is the outside in approach, where confidence is really based on performance and outcomes. So if an individual performs poorly, they'll actually lose confidence. They may dwell on their mistakes, and then this impacts future performance. So we really want to move away from this outside in approach to confidence and really focus on building the self-esteem of athletes and really focus on their self-identity outside of their athletic performance in order to really boost athletic performance. Okay, so well-being training, random acts of kindness is one type of training that's done. And what studies have shown is that it actually reduces pain when people engage in kind behavior. Dopamine, serotonin, these are all released. When there's multiple people engaging in random acts of kindness together, there's actually an increased release of oxytocin, and the bonds between these individuals are strengthened. Random acts of kindness reduce stress, so it increases both physical and mental health. So some examples of some exercises that can be done are gratitude letters or gratitude visits. A gratitude letter is when you write a letter to someone and you talk about your relationship with that person, what you're grateful for. And when you write the letter, you actually have a lot of positive benefits for yourself. When you go and read that letter to the individual in person, not only do you have benefits from this exercise, but the other individual has benefits. And as I mentioned in the last slide, we have this enhanced release of oxytocin, and the bonds become stronger between two individuals going through this exercise. Another really great exercise to do is what went well. And so what you do is you find 3 things that went well during the day and why they went well. You write them down. And for anyone who hasn't done this exercise, it's a really great exercise to do. I have done this exercise. I do this exercise. And what it does is when you're focused on the things that went well, it really changes your mindset. It changes your mood. You're really focused on the positive activities, and going through the process of why it went well also allows you to recognize what is helping your day go better, what is helping you achieve these positive activities. And you start to incorporate these things into your next day. And so it really has this cascade effect where it's impacting your future days, not just on the day that you do the exercise. Okay, in the mental strength model, the next area is focus. And when we talk about focus, it's really important to consider mindfulness. So mindfulness is the deliberate, non-judgmental, or compassionate awareness of present thoughts, feelings, and sensations as they arise in ourselves. We're striving to remain open, curious, and accepting of what is observed without automatically reacting. So mindfulness in sport, what this does is it allows for cognitive diffusion where we're able to separate ourselves from our thoughts. And so for athletes and coaches, this can create a gap between an action and a reaction, and it allows for for consideration of more effective responses to these thoughts or to these actions. It helps individuals become less reactive and triggered in a negative way, and people can become more flexible in their thinking. And so this is really key where it's, it's a great skill to have, and key where something happens, something, negative may happen. And if an athlete is able to recognize the action, not have a negative reaction to it and not react to it, then it can really set them up for more success in going forward. Okay. Some of the benefits of mindfulness is that we have reduced cortisol levels, improved sleep and daytime functioning, improved eating habits, increased attention to bodily signals, greater adaptation to stressful situations. And this is not just in the athletic event, practices, competitions, but by being mindful, this can really impact just general life well-being also. We see that mindfulness promotes improved self-compassion, ability to overcome challenges, focus when in that athletic endeavor, improved quality of life off the court, and self-reported well-being. So when creating a mindfulness practice, you want to really devote 10 minutes a day when starting. There are some great apps for this for people who want to do this. There's the Calm app. You can try it for free, see if you like it. There's also the Headspace app. And then there's also things that we do with athletes and coaches include really guided mindful meditation. And so I thought we could take a few minutes and try to do this. So for those who haven't done any type of mindfulness meditation, this will be a great exercise. We'll just take a couple minutes. So if people could get into a comfortable position where they're seated, and I'll go through this with you. So if you can go ahead and close your eyes. You want to listen for any ambient noises, knowing that each sound is anchoring your attention in the present moment. You want to bring attention to your whole body. Notice as best you can at this moment with compassion, openness, acceptance, and curiosity. Each time you notice your attention drifting from your body, you just became mindful again. Without indulging in the distraction or trying to suppress it, just gently and kindly bring your attention back to your body. Next, you want to begin to bring your mindful awareness to your current breath, if you haven't already. Notice as your chest and your stomach rise and fall with each passing breath. You're not trying to breathe in a special way, but rather just noticing the sensations of your torso expanding and relaxing with each passing breath. Each time you realize you're no longer noticing the current breath, gently and compassionately return your awareness to it. Some people find it helpful to name the distraction first, whether it's a thought, a sound, a feeling. You want to name it, to tame it, and return to your breath. If you notice you're feeling more relaxed, that's fine. If you're feeling anxious or unsettled, that's fine. If you're not sure how you're feeling, that's fine too. Notice those transitions from exhale to inhale and from inhale to exhale. Take a few more moments to notice your breathing. Now begin to widen your mindful awareness again, noticing your whole body in the seated position. Begin to notice sounds again. And before we finish, take a moment to notice any changes in the quality of your presence of mind since we started. Notice any changes in the feeling of your body since we began. At your own pace, begin to flutter your eyes or open your eyes, taking a few moments to reorient to the space, each other, maintaining mindful awareness. Okay, so this is the type of exercise that people can do to really be able to recognize the thoughts and sounds and feelings and bodily sensations, where they can focus on them and then let them go. And so they don't become a distraction when they're participating in sports or they're participating in just general activities of daily life. And at the end, when we have the Q&A, people can share this experience and how it felt for them. Another area that we talk about when considering focus is self-talk. So we're going to watch a little video here of a English goalkeeper. I know we have some international participants, and so this is an English goalkeeper and his thoughts on self-talk.
Our thoughts, they have a huge impact on how we feel. If you can learn how to think before a game, you can influence your performance on the pitch. Self-talk is a technique that positively manages your inner voice. It only takes a few minutes and helps you prepare for the 90 ahead. Let any negative thoughts go and replace them with the positive "I can" or "I will" statements, like "I can stop anything" or "I will dominate my area." It helps if you recall a great performance from the past. My pre-game routine takes me back to the Camp Nou. Barcelona versus Manchester City, March 17th, 2015. The world's most feared attack threw everything they had at me that night.
Neymar's in, and Joe Hart is flying out to great effect.
I stood up to it. Now, I mentally replay every save I made.
Beaten away by Hart.
I draw on the positive feelings they gave me at the time.
Hart needed again. He's there again.
My routine fills me with the belief that I will play at my best. It makes me realize the only person who can beat me is me.
Okay. All right. So I noticed a few questions in the chat while we were watching the video asking about my training in sports psychology. So I'm currently wrapping up an advanced degree in applied sports psychology. So, being able to use all these skills with athletes is something that I have been trained in and working with, currently working with athletes on these various types of skills. So as individuals, we tend to have a habit of ineffective self-talk. And so we tend to have negative self-talk, putting ourselves down. And what we want to do is we want to try to stop the ineffective thoughts that we're having initially. So we park these thoughts, and then we want to replace them with effective thoughts. And this is where power statements come in. So effective power statements, they're really simple. They focus on athletes' strengths They generate positive emotions. They can be technical statements that help athletes focus on successful execution. They can also be memory statements that recall past successes. Another area of focus is concentration. And so there's 4 components to concentration. We're attending to the relevant cues in the environment. So this is really selective attention. We're focusing on those cues that are relevant and really extinguishing those cues that are not relevant to the task at hand. Maintaining that attention over time, and this has to do with endurance and refocus. And then there's situational awareness and understanding performance feedback, and then being able to shift attention when necessary. We're able to shift attention and refocus and come back to really what's relevant and what we should be concentrating on. One key skill for focus is visualization. You want to see yourself deliver a great performance. So this is the Jamaican bobsledding team. They're really visualizing and focusing on being successful. And this is particularly a key skill to work on when individuals are injured. Here are 2 great quotes. Alison Felix. I am a big believer in visualization. I run through my races mentally so that I feel even more prepared. We also have Michael Phelps. I would visualize the best and worst case scenarios, whether I get disqualified or my goggles fill up with water or I lose my goggles or I come in last, I'm ready for anything. And this is something that I really like to do with athletes. I don't want to have them just visualize positive situations where they're being successful, they're making great shots, great plays, whatever the sport may be. I also want them to prepare for any disruptions to their performance that may arise, how they would handle an error if it were to arise. And so it's really important when doing visualization exercises to focus on both the positive and the negatives that can come about. Okay. So in terms of the mental strength model, the next area is quality practice. Practice should be seen as an opportunity to improve and learn. Individuals should be able to make mistakes. Mistakes provide feedback, which is an opportunity for growth. This is really important, and it's important to work with both athletes on this and also the coaching staff. We want coaches to also have a good mentality and so really have positive motivation for their athletes, and so that athletes don't feel scared to make mistakes and scared about the errors they may make. You want individuals to practice with purpose. So there should always be a focus for practice, and you can have a practice log to keep track of this and then to really address this. Coaches can address it with their athletes. You want them to write down, okay, what is your purpose of this session? What's your personal goal? Having athletes set goals where they're SMART goals is really important, and coaches can help their athletes do that, or athletes can work on it themselves. What can I do to make the team better today? That's another question that's really important. And then they should rate themselves on how well they did and really debrief after a practice about this. Okay, the last area to focus on is resilience. And so resilience is the ability to use personal qualities to adapt to and withstand pressure. It's the ability to be mentally and emotionally adaptable. For those who are not resilient, they often become demoralized if a plan is derailed. And so we really want our athletes to develop the skill of resilience. Des Linden here again, failure is an action, not an identity. If you learn from it and you get better, that's how you grow, okay? And so we don't want our athletes to be scared of failure. We want them to learn from mistakes and grow from them. All right. And when considering injured athletes, injuries can have a huge psychological impact on athletes. Injured athletes have been found to have lower self-esteem, increase in negative thoughts, higher levels of depression, and adolescent athletes are at especially high risk for depression after an injury. And this is where, when we use this outside in approach, it can be really detrimental to an athlete if they are injured, because they're no longer participating in their athletic performance. And so that is really affecting their self-esteem and self-identity. And so that's why we really want to take that inside out approach. When an athlete is injured, they will often go through a grieving period. There's a loss of self. There's negative beliefs and thoughts. They may have feelings of loss, such as denial, anger, depression, resignation. There's often a fear of re-injury. So for a lot of athletes I see in clinic, they're really concerned about going back to their sport and getting injured again. And this all causes an increase in recovery times. But what we also have found is that social support acts as a buffer in the recovery process. So it's really important that for our athletes, we take a holistic approach to recovery. So not just the physical approach, but we also want to give them the social and psychological techniques that can help them recover. I encourage all injured athletes to attend practices so that they're not feeling isolated. The goal is to help them deal with pressure as they're returning to their sports. And this is a big one. Coaches are often putting pressure on athletes to get them back out there. And so really helping them navigate this. And then also helping them deal with fear, the fear of returning to their sports, the fear of not being as good as they were before, the fear of re-injury. And so these are all things that we need to help our athletes with. And then when considering specialized care, and so it's really important to consider the general well-being and the general health of an athlete or individual and figure out when they actually may need an additional mental health professional, whether they need a psychiatrist, whether they need to have a therapist. And so when we're talking about when people aren't able, when their basic health needs aren't being met, then we're really moving away from sports psychology and mental performance training. And we're really moving more towards, we need to get them the help that they need and the support that they need in order to be successful in their lives. Okay, in summary, youth are participating in sports in record numbers. We see that active youth are happier and better adjusted than inactive youth. A mental strength model focuses on these different areas to address and to work on to improve the skills and improve performance excellence. We should take a build it approach rather than a fix it approach. We want to develop these skills in all athletes so that they can use them on the field, on the court, rather than just focusing on elite and high level athletes. We want everyone to develop these skills. Injured athletes need social support and a holistic approach to healing. And sometimes individuals need different mental health professionals to help them deal with the issues and the struggles that they're facing. Okay, let's see, I will open things up for questions. I think Aaron may have some questions.
Hey, yeah, thanks, Dr. Grebe, for giving that talk. One question that, and people can add questions onto the Q&A that you have a chance. I think one question that we did have too was like, since you work with all youth sports, like what age is appropriate to for this to begin with? Like, is there an age that's too young, or like more appropriate, like probably teenagers, or?
Yeah, so I actually think this is great to start introducing, and you want to introduce age appropriate skills at, you can start at a very young level as kids are getting involved in sports. I think as they're young, that's when we can start introducing things and really start developing some of these very basic skills. And of course, as they get to be older, they can then, really hone in these skills and focus on the higher level aspects of these skills.
And then speaking of the skills, I know there's a lot, like your kids have a lot going on and everything. What's like one thing if they take away, like what would your main focus be for and you talk about different techniques, like if the kids have a lot of high school, college, or other stuff, like well, if there's one thing they
Yeah.
could focus on, what do you think would be most beneficial for them to prioritize?
Yeah, so I know that there's a wide variety of professionals on the talk today. I think one thing that happens a lot is when talking about the outside in model versus the inside out model. We want to talk with kids and individuals, and so they know that their identity isn't made up completely of their athletic identity. And so when I see patients in clinic, I ask them about other things in their lives. They may see me as the person who deals with them when they're injured in sports or when something's going on athletically, but I want them to know that there's other things going on in their lives and there's other components of their lives that make up their identity. And so I think that's really important. And then I think another really big skill that we talk a lot about is self-talk and effective self-talk. We want to try and shut down negative self-talk where kids get down on themselves and really try to have more effective and positive self-talk.
That's great. Another question we had was, how do we reduce the fear of like re-injury for athletes who get injured, like want to go back to sports? Like I know that's a big one. How do we kind of reduce that? Like what can we do?
Yeah, and so that's an area where even just in clinic when I'm seeing injured athletes, I talk with them about that. I think it's super important that they know that they're supported, that there's not a rush to get back to their sport. Oftentimes, coaches want athletes, especially adolescent or higher level athletes, to get back to their sports. And so I think it's important that we make sure that they're aware that they're being supported. They don't need to be rushed. It has to be on their timeline. And sometimes that can take a little bit longer than coaches or parents may expect. But helping them ease back into things gradually and in a progressive fashion rather than jumping in 100% on day one. I think these are all things that we need to talk about with them.
Okay. Perfect. I think one thing that would be helpful too for everyone's like, do you have like recommendations for like resources in the area of people like to find a sports psychologist, a good one for things like a website we can use?
Yeah. So what we can do is maybe we can send out an email where we can have some different resources available to individuals if they're trying to look for someone, because it's sometimes hard to find people who are involved in doing this. I know in our area, there's really not a lot of individuals who do this for athletes. And so, and that's part of what prompted me to go and get additional training and an additional degree in this, just because it's such a need for athletes. And so we can provide a list of resources for participants.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Another question that we had is from some elite athletes believe that focusing on success in their sports and full belief is that the key to this, like being successful in their sports is like the key to their success in life. So what advice do you have for such athletes who about also being well-rounded and helping them to like prepare for their future that probably might not involve sports as well?
Yeah, and that's where the self-identity really comes in. I think it's important that athletes recognize that their identity is not just made up of their sport and their participation in that sport. And so I think it's important to encourage them to be involved in other activities. And that's where that question is, when you're thinking about your sport, if things don't go well, how is that going to make you feel? What else do we have in our lives besides our sport to really flesh out and develop that self-identity? Because it's when they have those other activities and then they become injured in their sport, they can really rely on those other activities, and they're able to recognize that it's not just their sport that is making up their self-identity. I think that's really important. I think it's important for parents to encourage that, for coaches to encourage that, for everyone to really allow for the development of other aspects of their self-identity.
Right. I know you kind of touched on a little bit there for like the parents and the coaches, like especially in our youth sports, they have a lot of involvement, big influence on these on the kids and the athletes at a young age. I know we're talking about like kind of talking about the kids and kind of like visualization for them and techniques, but does it ever come to a point you think where we have to like have conversation with the parents and do techniques with them as well? Like, do they have a big influence?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, all the time we see parents who are pushing their young kids to participate in sports. And a lot of parents will come in thinking, that their kid is the next superstar. And when we look at it, it's such a small percentage of kids who go on to play Division I sports in the US, let's say we're talking about. And then an even smaller percentage that go on to play pro sports. And so you're talking about a fraction of 1% who are reaching that level. And so for the majority of the parents who come in with injured athletes who are constantly being injured from overuse injuries because they're practicing on 3 practice team or 3 travel teams, it's important to have a conversation with the parents also, and to help them recognize that it may not be in their child's best interest to be practicing every single day and have no time off. And so I think it's important to have those conversations with parents also about doing things to help their children stay healthy.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much again for talking, Dr. Grebe. That actually think another question popped up real quick. What percent? I don't know if you know this, but what percent of injured sports players actually typically need like health interventions as a result of the injury?
Yeah, so I find that it's for the parents who are asking about this in clinic, I find that it's parents who have been involved with their athletes at an elite level, who are kind of aware of these services and aware of individuals who can meet with their athletes to provide them services. I mean, I think having an injury for an athlete that's longer than just a few weeks can be really difficult and really devastating for an athlete. And so that's why I think a lot of athletes would actually benefit from having someone to talk to who can encourage them and provide that holistic approach and provide that support for them. And I think it's also there's all these different pieces that are playing into it, right? We want to develop them and have their self-identity be more than just their sport. We want to have the parents supporting them and not pushing them. We want to have the coaches not pushing them. And then we also want to have someone who can talk to them and help them deal with what they're experiencing and what they're feeling, and help them recognize that, yes, they're injured. This is going to be a time for them to work through. There's some skills that they can do. There's some things that they can do so that they don't feel isolated and not a part of their team and not working on their skills while they're injured. And so I think, while the number is very small who actually get help, I think the number should be greater, just based on, these injuries are affecting kids of all levels and they all could benefit from it.
Oh, perfect. Thank you again, Dr. Grebe, for talking to us and everything. And then, do you have any final words or anything?
No, thanks everyone for joining us today. I think this is an area that is super important for our athletes.